Hi, welcome back to the basement. I'm Steve Lewis. Today we continue our in-depth look at Beach Boys recordings released in the year 1986. And as I did last time, in these three cubicles I've placed some of the new and notable records that you might have seen on sale in the record store if you'd walked in on September 1st, 1986, the day that the Beach Boys' California Dreamin' was released as a single. Of course, the single was a cover of the hit by the Mamas and Papas, written by group members John and Michelle Phillips, which was also included on their debut album, If You Can Believe Your Eyes and Ears, in 1966. California Dreamin' was first recorded by Barry McGuire and included on his 1965 album, This Precious Time. The Mamas and Papas provided the backing vocals on his version, which sounds almost identical to their version apart from McGuire's lead vocal and a harmonica instead of a flute for the instrumental break. That's not surprising since the Mamas and Papas reused McGuire's backing track for their version. McGuire's version and early copies of the single credit it to John Phillips only. Later pressings add Michelle Phillips under her original name of Michelle Gilliam. She became Phillips when she married John in 1962. The song was written in 1963. Incidentally, her name seems to be misspelled as Gillian on the label of the Beach Boys single. The Mamas and Papas single was released in November 1965. It became their first hit, peaking at number 4 on March 12, 1966. To add a little Beach Boy context, when California Dreamin' was hitting its chart peak, Barbara Ann was in its final week in the Hot 100 at number 40, having gone to number 2 for 2 weeks beginning back on January 29th. Brian's solo single, Caroline No, will enter the chart 2 weeks later at number 80, eventually rising to number 32 on April 30th. The next Beach Boys single, Sloop John B, will peak at number 3 1 week later on May 7th. The Beach Boys' 1986 cover, which first became available on the Made in USA compilation, which was released on July 7th, was not the first time that the Beach Boys had covered California Dreamin'. Back in 1983, a different version, completely different as far as I can tell, was released on the cassette-only Rock and Roll City on Mike Love's Hitbound Records label, available only through Radio Shack stores. We talked about this way back in episode 9, Mike Love, The Realistic Years. It was a pretty dire collection of oldies, re-recorded mostly by Mike Love and or Dean Torrance, with one song each re-recorded by The Association, Paul Revere and the Raiders, Bruce Johnston and Terry Melcher, and the Beach Boys doing California Dreamin'. Tracks from the cassette have been re-released on vinyl and on CD over the years, though as far as I can tell, all releases other than the cassette have omitted the Beach Boys track. The Rock and Roll City version opens with thunderstorm effects and a lead vocal by Mike in his pinched early 80s voice instead of Al Jardine. There's a crack of thunder in the 1986 version too. That comes after the first couple lines of verse. It's kind of strange, I really don't associate a winter's day with thunderstorms. Maybe with all those years living on the sunny West Coast, it's hard to keep all the various kinds of bad weather straight. Their new version was reportedly recorded in May of 1986. Initially, I was not too enthused about this as a new Beach Boy release. I didn't think the 1983 version had been anything particularly special, and I didn't really like the idea of them covering a song that had been done definitively 20 years earlier. It's kind of like remaking Citizen Kane. I thought, what's the point? Of course, the single was accompanied by a video. I really appreciated that the video respected the mood of the record. There's no attempt to be funny, no surfboards, no bikini models, and no references to earlier Beach Boy hits. It's shot in moody black and white, and the group plays it straight throughout. The lyrics are followed rather literally, with the Beach Boys stopping into a church they find along the way. I don't know what kind of church it is, but with Papa John Phillips as the minister, it's obviously not one of your standard denominations. Roger McGuinn, who performs on the record, mimes his guitar solo from the mezzanine level. He sports a pair of his trademark Bird's shades. Unusually, McGuinn gets credited with electric 12-string guitar, his signature instrument, on the single label. You can see it here around the 4 o'clock position just under Terry Melcher's producer credit. John Phillips mimes the sax solo. In an episode of the John Stamos sitcom You Again in the fall, Mike will mime the sax solo. We'll talk more about that later. I haven't been able to determine who actually played the sax solo on this, but I'm sure it wasn't John Phillips, and I'm completely sure it wasn't Mike Love. Michelle Phillips shows up in what might be a wedding gown. It's not clear dramatically why she's there. Maybe she's been stood up at the altar. Maybe John is behind on the alimony and she's there to pick up a check. Anyway, it's cool that she was included. Of the remaining members of the Mamas and Papas, Cass Elliot had of course passed away in 1974, and Denny Doherty was reportedly invited to take part in the video, but was on the East Coast at the time and unable to participate. It's too bad. It would have been great to see him there. The three guest stars also appear as ghostly apparitions at the beginning and at the end of the video. As skeptical as I was, I really enjoyed the Beach Boys version of California Dreamin'. The 80s touches are there, particularly in the vocals and in the drums, but they're more restrained than on Rock and Roll to the Rescue and even on parts of Beach Boys 85. In some cases, like the delay and echo on Al's vocal on the word warm, the 80s touches are effective and keep it from being a straight-ahead remake of the Mamas and Papas original. McGuinn's 12-string also sets it apart. I particularly like the very Birds-like solo just before the sax break. Of course, Terry Melcher had produced the first two Birds albums for Columbia, so he certainly knew something about how to get that sound. For the Beach Boys in the 80s, this was kind of a departure in style, which is something I appreciate. The group is all in good voice, especially Carl, though they stick pretty close to the Mamas and Papas vocal arrangement, except for a little flourish in the backing vocals just before the sax re-enters at the end of the record, which is a nice moment. They've changed it up just enough to make it distinctly their own, and it's a very nice track. Al takes center stage on the single's B-side as well with Lady Liberty, a reworking of Lady Linda from 1979's The Light album with new lyrics celebrating the 1986 centennial of the Statue of Liberty. I thought the lyrics had been the weakness of the original version, unless you also happen to be crazy about somebody named Linda, but the love lyrics were unobtrusive enough that they didn't interfere with my enjoyment of the beautiful melody and performance. Alan and wife Linda Sperry had divorced in 1982, so he may have been looking for a way to reuse the tune, and this gave him an opportunity. Over the Bach opening, Al, with delays and echoes, recites from the poem The New Colossus by Emma Lazarus, which of course appears on a bronze plaque inside the Statue of Liberty. The poem had been written in 1883 to raise money for the construction of the statue's pedestal. It remains a very beautiful tune, but this is certainly not my preferred version. There might be something interesting to be said about the Statue of Liberty, but the lyrics here are just kind of cliches and boilerplate sentiments, and making it so specifically about the Statue of Liberty somehow to me diminishes the song while failing to capture any of the actual grandeur of the Statue of Liberty itself. And Lady Liberty just doesn't work as nicely with the melody as Lady Linda does. I really don't think he sings this quite as well as the original either, and for that matter neither does Carl, which gives me the impression that they recorded it very quickly, possibly with use as a B-side in mind. For me, I will happily stick with the original Lady Linda from the Light album. The California Dreamin' single peaked at number 57, 11 spots higher than Rock and Roll to the Rescue, on October 25th, 1986. Also released in the summer of 1986 was 25 Years of Good Vibrations presented by Sunkist. In 1986, Sunkist was sponsoring the Beach Boys summer tour. Of course, Sunkist had a long history with the Beach Boys by this time, having used Good Vibrations as a jingle in their commercials for orange soda at least as far back as 1979. In his book, Mike Love says it was 1978, which sounds about right. According to the booklet in the 25 Years of Good Vibrations album, Sunkist had been using the song for 9 years, putting it back to 1977, but I definitely would not go by any information in that booklet. The booklet is 14 pages full of narrative about pop culture and the Beach Boys, with some pages of photos. As you'd expect, the tone is glowing and probably a little over the top with its patriotic spin. I don't think they actually call the Beach Boys America's band anywhere, but they are referred to as capturing the spirit of America's teendom, America's greatest rock and roll band, America's best loved rock and roll band, and they tell us their music captures the hopes, dreams, and playfulness of American youth, and their harmonies convey a positive outlook, exuberance, and the love of freedom that is associated with the spirit of America. After beach and boys, I would guess that the most frequently appearing word in this text is America. As far as written history goes, it's a grab bag of facts and often wildly inaccurate. There are sections summarizing decades of pop culture, that are so fragmented, stream of consciousness, and randomly punctuated with exclamation points that it sounds like it was transcribed from a crazy person ranting on a bus. You certainly don't expect a hard-hitting expose on the Beach Boys in a narrative like this, or even to really learn anything new, but this doesn't even hit the main points you expect from a standard retelling of the Beach Boys story. Instead, you get a sort of alternative universe bizarro Beach Boys story where their first record is recorded by someone named Dorinda Gordon and her husband, Joe Saraceno. Brian writes Monkey's Uncle for Annette in 1966. Mike and Al go to India with the Beatles. The group's landmark album is 15 Big Ones. The Light album is a collector's item, and Pet Sounds barely rates a mention. Maybe it's just indicative of how difficult it was to get information in those days. It really looks like somebody was just randomly assigned to generate narrative to fill up this book, and that she just went to the public library and grabbed a random selection of facts without knowing what was correct or what was important and what wasn't. The weirdest point in the narrative is when it comes to modern day. There's a section devoted to describing the 50s and 60s themed shout disco in New York, which reportedly plays at least one early classic Beach Boys record each hour, and the new generation dances to their music. Even stranger is the news that a new line of Beach Boys sportswear for men and boys is set to reach stores by Christmas of '86. Women's fashions will debut in the spring of '88. There will be swimsuits, shorts, jackets, and shirts, hats, bags, sunglasses, even boogie boards and surfboards, all bearing the Beach Boys label. This is several years before Mike tried launching something similar with the Camp California line. There's kind of a vague, non-committal sketch that goes with the information. I'd love to know more about the plans for this clothing line. The booklet is a wild ride and often hilariously off-kilter, but I think it really should be marked for entertainment purposes only. Of course, you have to keep in mind that this is as much a promotional product for Sunkist as it is a Beach Boys compilation. I think there's more interest here in creating positive associations with Sunkist products via the Beach Boys than there is in promoting any interest in the group themselves. In his 2016 autobiography, Mike Love says that Sunkist paid $1.5 million to use Good Vibrations in its commercials and promotions. And he tells the story of his response when a Sunkist executive asked him if he drank Sunkist orange soda. According to Mike, he told the exec, "If I was driving my Range Rover through the Mojave Desert and it broke down, I would first drain my radiator fluid and drink that before I had a Sunkist." He then goes on to say that the use of Good Vibrations helped make Sunkist the #1 orange soda in America by 1980. Of course, Mike doesn't just happen to tell that story in his memoir. Obviously, there's some bad blood there and an axe to grind. Not sure what happened or when, but in 1986, the Beach Boys and Sunkist were very much in a corporate partnership. On the album itself, you get a total of only 9 tracks. There were 4 key Beach Boy tracks: California Girls, Wouldn't It Be Nice, Good Vibrations, and Fun, Fun, Fun. Additionally, there's the recent hit Get You Back and the 1981 number 12 hit Beach Boys Medley. I believe this is the first time the medley had appeared on an album. For a Beach Boy completist on a limited budget in 1986, and I very much speak from experience, this was actually a much better deal than the Made in USA compilation. It was filled out with the 2 new tracks from Made in USA, plus a previously unreleased track unavailable elsewhere, Runaway, for $4.99 on a single album rather than shelling out for a double set. Anyway, if you'd bought Made in USA, you'd still need to buy this to get the Beach Boys version of Runaway. According to the notes on the album, the track was masterminded by Beach Boy Al Jardine. Runaway, of course, had been a hit for Del Shannon in 1961. It was his first hit and his only #1, going to the top of the charts for 4 weeks beginning April 24th. The Beach Boys performed Runaway live occasionally in the early to mid-60s. In Becoming the Beach Boys, Jim Murphy finds them performing it as early as June 2nd, 1962. I'm not sure who handled the lead vocals in those days, but when Al joined or rejoined the group, it became an Al Spotlight number. You can hear him perform it in 1965 on the 2013 Made in California set and on the 2015 copyright protection download Live in Chicago 1965. They revived it for Al to perform in concert in 1982. And I remember they played it at the show I saw that year outside Detroit. At the time, I thought they'd chosen it because the organ sound of the original had kind of a new wave feel that was perfect for early 80s audiences. The recording here has a live opening tagged onto it, with Al telling the audience that they're part of a live recording experience here. Apart from the tag, I'm not sure how much of the recording is actually live. Al's vocal sounds double-tracked to me, and the backing vocals are pretty complex and dead-on perfect for a live cut. Maybe it's been extensively overdubbed. It's still a pretty simple arrangement. My guess would be that it's live in the studio with additional overdubs, which I guess would make it pretty much just a studio recording. There's an audience response and a live thank you at the end, but it sounds tagged on to me. If anybody knows anything definitive about whether this is a live cut or not, and if it is a live cut, where it's from, please pass that along. Some of the backing vocals seem original to the group's version and are very cool. Carl stands out on a cool and original, as far as I can tell, very doo-woppy, I wonder why backing section about 1 minute and 10 seconds in, which sounds great and brings something new to the song. The album wasn't something you'd find in a typical record store in 1986. Apparently it was a mail-in item available through Sunkist. The booklet calls it one of their Fun and Sun premiums. I've looked around and I haven't figured out exactly how you obtained this, whether there were mail-in coupons on Sunkist store displays or on Sunkist products or what. There's a coupon in the booklet for ordering more copies at $4.99 a piece, but I don't know exactly how you were supposed to get the first copy. I've also been told that the album might have been available at Beach Boy concerts during that summer tour. I got my copy at Rockaway Records in LA. They always had the obscure releases, and there were a handful of these in the store, which is where I picked up mine. I think if I hadn't been going to Rockaway pretty regularly in those days, I would have had no idea that this had been released. If anybody has any additional information or anything definitive on how that record was available back in the day, please pass it along. Now there's one more album of previously unreleased Beach Boy material that came out in 1986, and we will talk about that next time when we wrap up the Beach Boys 1986. Meanwhile, I look forward to your comments on this. Please hit like and subscribe if you haven't. I really appreciate that. As always, have a great week, and we will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.